ask yourself, who do I need to become? What kind of a person do I need to become? Then that this person that I wrote in my vision would be attracted to. If you're writing this vision, the girlfriend vision, boyfriend vision, whatever vision, you're probably not writing something that's worse than your current situation. You're writing something that's much better, right? So if that's the case, have you become the person that's going to align with that person that you put on that vision?
Hey there, welcome back to another episode of The Life Inner Show. On The Life Inner Show, we help people make more, work less, and live better lives. I am joined by my co-host, Polish Peter.
So, hey, man, so are you sure, like 100% sure you want to record this particular episode? Because, I mean, we might not be here next week.
Yeah. Dude, this might be our last episode ever. Depends on who listens to this. We are going to talk about relationships, about marriage, about partnership, and we're going to share some of the lessons we've learned through our relationships. And, so depending on how this goes, man, and if the wives listen to it, this might be the end of the Life Inner Show.
So I will just say as a disclaimer for everybody on this particular episode, we're both married. We've both been divorced.
Happily married.
Very happily married. That's right. We're both happily married. We married the best person in the world. She chose me, or well, I chose her. But I guess it goes both ways. But yeah, I mean, listen, on the serious side of things, I mean, I think it's a really important conversation to have because marriage is is one of the most important relationship that you're ever going to have in your life. Yeah. So you should probably really think about and consider to do this wisely. And I think a lot of times from even our both walks, I mean, I didn't know what I know now based on, how it looks like to choose the right partner in your life.
Right, right. And I mean, and in full disclosure, you guys probably already know this, but Peter and I are both divorced. So we both had a previous marriage prior to this. And so we've had a lot of experiences that, if we can share our failures, some lessons, some things we've learned along the way through our relationships, then this would be a well worth it listen. And so I hope you get something out of the episode. So, man, let's start off with I didn't have a vision until I was, gosh, in my 30s, and so I didn't know what I really wanted in a spouse. And I never took the time to really crystallize that. And so, and by the way, I'm, I guess this is gonna sound weird, but I'm very experienced in relationships. And what I mean by that is for some reason, and I think it's probably because connection is one of my bigger needs. I've pretty much always had a girlfriend. Not always, but I've had several relationships that have gone 2, 3, 5 years, not just, flings, but
did they know that?
Long, yeah, right. Long relationships. And so that's something that and for some reason, I just have always enjoyed companionship. And so I've had a lot of lessons over the years, but many of those relationships, I didn't have and by the way, I never had any horror stories. It's not like that. But some of these people really weren't a great match for me, and I'm sure I wasn't a great match for them either. Mm-hmm. Both of us likely never had a vision for what we're looking for in a spouse. And so I think that's one of the first things, we talk a lot about vision and life in air, but most people kind of think that it only applies to you, but it also applies to what you want your marriage to look like. Imagine for a second that we put enough time or put the same amount of time into planning what we want our marriage to look like versus just planning the wedding, right? Even if we did that one thing alone, we'd have, 50% less divorces. That's speculation, but I believe that's true because people just don't spend the time to think about this stuff.
Yeah, this is an important point that you just brought up. People spend the same amount of time for their marriage they spend planning their wedding. I mean, it would be huge. So here's the thing. We brought up about the vision because on Life on Our Show, we talk about having a vision for your life. But we, very seldom talked about having a vision for your partner. And I think this is a really important aspect, whether it's a marriage partner, whether it's a business partner, whether it's any kind of partner that you're going to be in a long-term relationship. I do it with all of my students. Even when they're looking at partnering with someone for the business, I ask them, when it comes to your business, it is like your marriage. You're going to be with that person for a very long time. So you have to create a vision for what that partner is going to look like. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean that it stops at, okay, if you're a man, she's hot, right? Or if you're a woman, he's handsome or whatever. There is a lot more to that. So, what does that vision actually look like? And I learned this. I hate to say it, but I learned this particular thing from you about creating that girlfriend vision. So, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, man. So this is, and by the way, take this what you'd like. I think there's some value here, but you don't have to do it the exact same way. So let me kind of rewind for a moment. So my first marriage, I mean, she was beautiful. But we didn't align on a lot of other things. And so I didn't have that vision. So after we got divorced, which by the way was hands down the most painful thing I ever went through. Um, it was rough. And it's not because she was mean or she dragged me through the mud or anything like that. It's just that like when I said those words I really truly meant it for eternity. And so that hurt a lot. So when I went back to the drawing board, I was ready to start dating probably about a year later or so. I just wasn't emotionally ready to really commit to anybody or even entertain the idea. I realized that I had some thinking to do. I had some reflection to do that previously I really hadn't done. And so I decided to put together a vision for my perfect spouse. So here's how I did it. I had my lists of musts. These are the things that are non-negotiables, that they're deal breakers. Like, so if you don't have these things, it's a deal breaker. No matter how many of the other things you had, if you didn't have the musts, the non-negotiables, it wasn't a match. And so for instance, that was some examples, like they're Christian, you know, they are ethical and moral, and it mostly has stuff to do with character, frankly. I think on there was also they were health focused. And then I had my lists of shoulds. Now these are the things that are really important, but they're not deal breakers. Like if one or two of these things is off, then it's worth further consideration. It's not a blanket, like no. And then I had my would be nices, which are like, this is like the icing on the cake. Like, yeah, it would be cool if she was tall or if she liked giving massages, right? Or liked to cook, those kinds of things. This is just the fun stuff, right? And then I had my must nots, cannots, should nots. And this is the stuff for me, it was like the negative things that like if they're materialistic, if they're racist, if they're conceited or arrogant, like some things that were just super big no-nos for me, real big turnoffs. And so I created this list and I just put it in a Word doc. Turned out to be 3 pages long, single space bullet points. And, dude, true story. I remember showing it to one of my female friends at the time, and she's like, "You're going to be single the rest of your life." She literally said that to me. Like, and I'm sure she thought
I would concur with her on that one. It's not
right.
because of the list anyway.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I stood by it. And so fast forward, like I'm on this funny story, man. I'm on my first date with my wife, now wife.
This is a first date.
First date, dude. First date. Because at that point I'm like, you know what? I don't want to beat around the bush. I don't want to like pretend to be, you know what I mean? I want to be straightforward with people. I don't want to waste anyone's time, theirs or mine. And so we start talking about like, previous dates. Because dude, I don't know what to talk about. So I just start like we start talking about previous dates and like, funny stories and stuff like that.
She's like, oh my God, this guy's talking about his ex-girlfriends. Seriously, on the first date?
I did not do that. And so she's like, so what are you looking for in a girl? And I'm like, well, I actually have a list. And I started saying I have a list, and she heard me. And I literally tried to play it off. Like I tried to make it funny. Like, oh, I know. I said I have a lisp. She's like,
that's true too.
She's like, don't even try it. She's like, you have a list? Are you serious? And I was like, I mean, yeah, kind of a little bit. She's like, well, I want to see it. And I'm like, no way, no way. And so, dude, after that night, she brought it up a couple times and I refused. She literally, like every time I would text her or try to call her, she'd text me back. She said like, hey, I want to see the list. I'm not talking to you. Let's see the list. She would not talk to me. She's like, she kept on me about it. So finally I send it over to her and I'm like, well, you know what? May as well. Like if she reads it and she doesn't take it well, then she's not a great fit to begin with anyway. So she reads it and by the way, she calls me after she gets it and she's on the phone with me. She's reading it, and I'm just sitting there in silence, and I hear, oh, really? I'm like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, which part is she reading right now? She gets to the end and she says, well, I think I meet all your criteria, but I'm not sure you meet mine. So I'm going to create my own list. And here we are, my brother. And so it worked. But listen, man,
So then she did a pity on you, and she's like, "Fine, I'll marry him," kind of thing.
I just beat her down. Yeah.
Beat her down.
I wore her down. I'm like,
Okay. Oh.
but here, listen. And here's a cool thing though. My daughter, who at the time was in college, sent me one evening. I get a text from her. It's kind of late at night. And she
Mhm.
sends me like 3 pages, 4 pages of notebook paper of handwritten. I'm like, what is this? Zoom in and it's her list of what she's looking for in a guy. And I'm like, holy cow, man. Like, how cool is that? Like, that was like one of the coolest, papa moments that there is, like to realize that I've instilled a little bit of like wisdom into my daughter, where now she's not just going to be drawn to the guy with the nicest smile or a car or he's tall or whatever, right? You know what I mean? Like, so, or he's funny, like, because those things I think that's the stuff we look at because it's so
Mhm.
visible. It's so easy to recognize. Like, yeah, they're tall, they're funny, they work hard, but there's so much more to the perfect spouse.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important that list. And I want to go even further on this particular thing because, I mean, after you, I mean, you were hunting me for making that list for myself for I don't know how
I
long it's
was
been.
hounding you, yeah.
It was a while, and then
You
finally,
resisted.
and I think what changed me is you got married. I'm like, oh, if he got married, I mean, geez, I
This
mean,
guy, right?
this guy, I mean, he's I don't think last man on the earth and kind of a thing got married, so maybe it will work for me. So I did the list myself, right? And I remember I did this, and literally 3 months later, I met the girl who was matching the list. But what happened over the reason why I share my part of the story is because I want you guys to recognize how important it is to put stuff on that list and why it is so important how you and what you actually put on there. So I started dating this girl, and after 2, 3 months of dating her, I recognized she was not emotionally available because of what happened to her in the past. And I went back to my list, and guess what was not under? The emotionally available part. I don't even know how I missed it because it's an important part for me.
Mm.
So we went our separate ways. I added that on there, and literally within a month or so later, I met another girl, and she met emotional available, met all those different things. And now what came up with that particular girl, she was very political. Guess what was not on the list? The political. But what I decided, and I started looking, which category would I put that political stuff under? And that was should not kind of thing. It doesn't matter to me, especially since she aligned with my belief system in that, right? So that was fine. But the important part of that is think about it this way: emotional available, that went into my must list. Like she has to be emotional available. And that's why we had to, part our ways. Whereas this one, political, should not. So that's one part. Second part, I want to encourage every single one of you guys, because notice like, I don't know if you guys are hearing from what Wojo's sharing, but it's those characteristics, right? Characteristics that we put on there, like she's witty or smart or funny or Christian or loyal or, she's whatever it is, right? And you put those different things on there. But I want to go one step further. I would encourage every single one of you to go and look at what is her belief system. Like, what does she believe about, let's say, their relationship? What does she believe about money? What's her belief about raising kids if you want to have kids? Those kinds of things. So you can start digging a little bit deeper into what that person believes, what the person thinks, because it's going to be challenging later on where, let's say, you believe that that is not a big deal and you love that, and your spouse hates that. She believes that that is, you should never have that. There's going to be challenges in the relationship trying to resolve some of these things to whether it's growing your life or your business, especially if you're real estate, right? Some people use that to build a real estate, but if the spouse doesn't align with it, there might be some challenges. So I would encourage every single one of you, as you guys are looking at that list, one, it's super powerful. It works. I mean, me and Vojo are obviously one example of it, but we could go through the list of my students, that done that same exact thing, and they found a relationship. Even one of them, I married them a year and a half ago because he wrote the list, created that person, ended up meeting her, got married, and he asked me to be, officiate the wedding, right? Which was huge honor.
That's awesome.
But going as far as looking what the belief system is for that particular person. And this stuff works.
Dude, it's so important. Like, so you really got to figure out what are the things that are really important to you. So for instance, like some of the things I see people get stuck and hung up on is like, is one really into health and the other one doesn't care at all? Does one want to be a stay-at-home parent but the other expects them to work? How about, maybe sometimes I see this where, one of them wants to be an entrepreneur and the other one wants them to have a job. Do they want kids, right? Where do you want to live? Like what kind of house? Dude, I dated a girl once that drove a nice car and she was pretty well off. And I kind of mentioned to her that like, that stuff doesn't really matter to me that much. Like, I'm not interested in, going into a significant amount of debt to have like a huge palace or like a great car. Like I'm not trying to have a car payment. And that wasn't a good match because she kind of wanted me to kind of fit that role and to impress people. And so that one wasn't a good fit and that didn't last. Right. And we had those discussions early on. And so that's another point too, is I think you got to have the discussions. Like more frequently, I think people will sweep those things under the rug because they don't want confrontation. They don't want to have an awkward moment. They don't want to have any friction. But those things are...
They don't want to be rejected.
Yeah, they're going to cause friction. It's way better to solve those things early than later. Like nothing gets better with time with those things. Like it just builds up. And now you get to the point where you discuss it and the person might be like, well, why didn't you tell me this 2 years ago? Right? Because it doesn't get easier. Like, and I'm not telling you to break up with your significant other or your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your partner. But some of the conversations, if you're not fulfilled and if you're not on the same page, it's worth a discussion. Now, I'll also say something about that because sometimes on the surface, it can seem like you guys are off. But if you ask a couple clarification questions, you may find that you're actually almost on the same page, but you're just viewing the fulfillment of it differently. So for instance, maybe, someone that wants a nice car, it's not really because they're trying to impress anybody else. It's that they want to feel successful and they want to feel like their hard work has been justified. And this is how they chose to do it, right? For you, maybe you don't need that, but you also feel, you like to feel acknowledged, but you accept that in a different way. And so sometimes you got to look for the underlying commonality, the common factor between these things, and not just automatically discard it as like, oh, we're not a good match. Nope, forget it. Like that'd be probably a little premature.
Hey, so let me interrupt this episode. And before we get back into it, here's what I want to share with you guys. One of the things that we do throughout the year, all over the country, is we do this event called Business Builder Event. This is the event where we literally outline, help you figure out and create a business that you love and a business that support your life. One of the things that we found over the years that many people become basically a slave or work an employee to their business, and they're working so much in their business that they don't actually get to live their life. And in this particular workshop, we help you redesign that, a business that supports your life. So what do you want to have for them, Wojo? What do we have for them because of that?
Man, well, Peter, because they are loyal listeners, and I know they're tuned in every week, and they've told everyone in their life about the Life in Air Show podcast, we have a very, very special offer for you. Now, by the way, I don't know how long we're going to offer this, so this isn't forever. But if you go to lifeinair.com right now and you go to the events tab and then you go to the Business Builder Workshop, you can, when you pick the event you want, when you go to that checkout page, there's a little place right there. It says enter promo code. And guess what? We have a promo code for you for 50. That's 50, half. 50% off the ticket for the Business Builder Workshop by entering the promo code podcast into the promo code field. Instantly, you'll get a 50% savings. You'll see it right there on the screen, and you will be registered for that event. And here's the cool thing. You will be off to the races to create a life and a business that complement each other for the first time, maybe ever. And it's amazing.
One more thing I want to share with you before we jump back into the episode is this. One of the participants at our recent podcast, he was in a hot seat. We do these hot seats in front of the room, and we kind of dissect their business. And one suggestion that he got, and he made the change, went home, made the change, and pretty much within a few months went into stage 4, meaning into his business, that the business basically supported his life. The income that was coming, the cash flow that was coming into his business, by making that one change, started living in a way that he doesn't have to work for the business works for him. So I would encourage you guys, head over to the website, get, learn about this event, type in podcast, and we'll see you on the next event. Now let's get back into the episode. Right, because you look at the surface, quote unquote, problem as opposed to what's the problem beneath the problem kind of a thing, right? Yeah. So you look down deeper. I will tell you guys, I've seen so many instances from my own coaching conversations with a lot of students who are couples, that when we get deeper into what's behind it, we come to find out that the couple is literally on the same page. It's just that surface thing. What they know, I want a BMW. No, I want a Ford kind of a thing. Then in this area, it can seem like they're a completely different page. But if you start digging deeper into it, you start to discovering what that real belief is underneath it, and they come to find out they're on the same page. One other important point that I want to make that I think is really important when it comes to this whole entire conversation before we get off the podcast is this. Let's consider for a minute that you are a man and you wrote this vision and you're looking for this woman, and you start dating these different people, or there are women coming into your life or whatever it might be. The person, whoever it is that's coming into your life, and they are not the person that you wrote on that vision. Here is what I want you to consider, that the possible reason why that person that's coming into your life, that partner, whoever it might be, is not in that vision yet, is because you yourself have not become the person that other person is looking for. So one of the most important aspects of writing that vision, once you have that vision written down, and you ask yourself, who do I need to become? What kind of a person do I need to become then that this person that I wrote in my vision would be attracted to? So if you are not meeting those kinds of people, it's a very sobering question to ask yourself, that if I want to meet that particular person, who do I need to become? What level do I need to rise up to for that person to meet? Because if you're writing this vision, the girlfriend vision, boyfriend vision, whatever vision, you're probably not writing something that's worse than your current situation or current. You're writing something that's much better, right? So if that's the case, have you become the person that's going to align with that person that you put on that vision, that person is looking for? And then your goal becomes to start working on you to become that person that this person that you wrote on vision is going to be attracted to. Yeah. And I think a lot of people miss that aspect. And when you start looking for that perspective, and you work on, boom, 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 boom. And that's when what ends up happening later on, I think that person just shows up in your life because they get attracted to that new version of you, that now they're like, man, I'm looking for that same person, the similar type of a person, right? Or that person is my vision in a way.
Well, this makes sense. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because here's the thing, like let's just play two scenarios out. Like, and you're someone who maybe you're kind of negative, you're a little bit of a pessimist. You don't really work that hard. You don't really take good care of that good care of yourself. You're not really driven. You're kind of complacent. I'm not sure you're going to attract somebody who's driven, who's motivated, who takes care of themselves, who's an optimist, who, likes accomplishing things, and if you do, it's going to be someone who wants to fix you probably. And that situation never works. Like the fixer syndrome, like don't, trust me, do not fall for that. That creates a very, very unhealthy power.
Hard to change people.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't recommend that. And so you got to really work on you. And I think what Peter said is true, is like you'll start to attract the right kind of person because you yourself will exude those qualities. Right. And that's something that I think really does resonate with people. They can see it and they can feel it, and your energy will be different. And so I'd encourage you to kind of look at that. And so I think it really does come down to having those clear beliefs. Like, and here's another one that we didn't even mention, man, is like, how much do you want to have, and how much do you want to work? Those are another things too. Like, 'cause sometimes You'll have someone that's completely career focused and like, meanwhile, this person really wants to be spending a significant amount of time with them. And they're like, hey, my job kind of comes first. And again, not right or wrong, maybe just not the right fit for you if that's not what you want. And so you got to just understand these things early on and have those conversations. One of the
Hey,
things,
explain to me a little bit before we jump in. How much do you have? What does that mean? Because I don't know if the listener is clear on that.
well, for instance, let's say like let's say, do you want a simple life? Or do you want to have a big house and a big mortgage
Okay.
and have
Yep.
a bunch of cars and
Mhm.
a timeshare and all those things? Like what is your lifestyle? What kind of lifestyle are you looking for? Or is it one of simplicity and kind of like, hey, we're debt free? Or is it like, hey, I'm okay with having the $1 million house and having a $800,000 mortgage and the payments that go along with it. That's that. So just find out what that looks like. And
Right.
I also want to say that I recognize that people do change over time. And so that's another conversation, but it's worth probably dipping our toe in the water there too. Is like the people, everybody changes. Like especially if you're someone who's into personal development and growth, the person you are now is very unlikely to be the person you are in 4 years. And so this is why you want to kind of, as much as you're able to, like predict that vision for who you're gonna be so that you can attract that person now and you can work towards that person starting now versus your vision now and you get to a place of development 4 years from now and guess what, your spouse is perfect for you back then, but now there's some real issues, right? Because you guys aren't a match anymore. So there's more fixing of that and reconciliation and conversations and effort that will have to. And by the way, I'm not saying that you. Let me also say this: like, I do believe you get married, you work it out, except in very very extreme cases. And so as you grow, hopefully your spouse does as well. But you got to recognize that sometimes people do grow apart. But you still got to focus on the relationship. You still got to maintain those things. And it starts off with having the really clear vision of what that person looks like.
Yeah, I would want to clarify something. As we're growing, as couples are growing, people are growing, and they quote unquote change, right? It's not that there's something to be fixed, I don't per se, I don't think. It's more of like, when that other person grows, the reason why you have a challenge with that is not because that they've grown, it's because that you see the insecurity within you that's having you be challenged. So the question becomes is that, maybe I need to grow in some way. Maybe I need to grow as a person. I mean, I will tell you this, that as I'm married now, we're going on 3 years. As we moved into the house, I mean, my wife, been living her by herself their whole life, kind of thing, majority of her life. So as we moved in, there were some challenges that we needed to work out as far as what the living circumstances is, right?
Be careful what you say right now.
I am very careful, right? I'm not saying, but listen, if she listens, she knows there was a challenge there, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
we had to work it out. And there were certain types of growth that needed to happen on both of our, each other to be able to come align to where we are living happily together, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we human beings hate to change, but the change happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, and listen, sometimes a change isn't a good change. Like some people, sometimes, listen, this happens too, man, and we can go on forever about this, but like sometimes people, when you're dating, are putting their best foot forward and they're putting forward like, I don't want to say an act, but like what their ideal self,
Yeah.
that doesn't last, right? So that's a whole other thing too. And so this is where I do believe you really got to put yourself in some situations with them. I just got off the phone with a buddy the other day who is dating someone long distance. She sounds awesome. He's my friend. He's awesome. But I'm like, dude, you really gotta spend some time with each other and get past the honeymoon phase and know what this is really gonna be like. And quite frankly, I think this is, I'm definitely not saying to start a fight, but one huge factor that's been shown through research to indicate whether or not divorce is inevitable is how do you fight with your spouse?
Mm-hmm.
Does it get ugly? Is it a knockdown, drag out fight? Are you guys cussing at each other? Are you insulting each other? Or do you handle it kind of more maturely where you're like, hey, you know what? Let's cool off for a second here. Like let's come back down. How do you fight? So I think,
Yeah.
those kinds of things you got to find out early on because like, a crazy fight like can cause a lot of damage. And so, like, how do they fight? That's another thing you got to explore and find. And by the way,
That's all on our podcast
do not
episode we
take
could
me
record
as
on.
telling you to
Yeah.
get in a fight with your spouse.
Yeah.
But this is something again that maybe is even on your vision. They fight with maturity, and we disagree, and we can handle it respectfully. And so that's another thing too. But like for instance, I'll give you an example of change. Like so my wife went through a period a couple years ago, actually maybe a year ago, where for a couple of years she was totally into running, was never into running at all for the period we dated, even for the first several years of marriage. And she got into running, and she kind of stopped lifting, which is one of the things we had in common. And we go to the gym together and work out, and she wasn't doing that anymore. And so
Sure, it wasn't because of you.
what's that? She's trying to run away from me. Yeah. She's metaphorically trying to escape. Yeah.
She getting frustration on dumbbells.
Right. Well, and she started running, and a little bit of me was bummed. I'm like, oh man, I used to kind of like, I like working out and lifting weights and stuff. But I also chose to look at her and be like, wow, that's awesome. Like she's totally
Right.
a brand new thing. She was never really good at it, and she's embraced it, and she's done all these races, and she's done all these amazing things with it now. And by the way, now she's back into lifting. So it's cool. Like there will be these seasons,
Yes.
and it's okay. You just got to kind of, again, look for the commonalities, look for the common factors, assume the best, assume that, if you wanted to think something good about what they're doing, like, is there something that you could admire or respect or be excited about? And I think it's that kind of filter that helps you get past things. Because man, like the little things when you're dating become like the little cute things when you're dating can become annoying, and you can become resentful of later. So they leave their shoes in the hallway every day, or they leave their dishes in the sink. That stuff when you're dating, you're like, whatever. It's now you're married 10 years and you're like, oh, if he leaves his dishes in the sink one more time. Right. So it's just this dance, man. It's just this dance where you guys got to just feel each other. Dude, I'm also a fan of like regular I think it's so important to have regular conversations, not just like
Yes, it is.
about the kids or about the TV show you just watched, but like check in with each other as to how things are going and how you're doing as a couple. Maybe even having structured meetings where it's like, hey, once a month we're going to talk about the finances. Like, how are we doing? We're going to talk about like how we're doing as parents. We're going to talk about how we're feeling emotionally connected. Like, and now admittedly, I'm a little bit more of like the kind of analytical, kind of nerdy, like, hey, we should have a meeting. And my wife is not like that, but she also like goes along with it. And I think it's valuable time. So like, I think this is all important stuff, man.
Yeah. So I think hopefully that as you guys are listening to this episode, big takeaways from the conversation is number one, before you start anything, write that vision, write that partner vision. Don't delay, do it today as soon as possible, kind of a thing. It's one of those things without taking step one, you don't go to step two, right? And it's so important to write that, partner vision that you have for anything that's important to you in life. And once you start working toward that, you're going to start to discover a lot of things about the partner, about yourself, who do you need to become, how you need to grow, how you need to communicate. And a lot of those things are things I'm going to stem from what we've been talking about this particular episode. So
that's it. Hope you guys got something out of this, because really relationships are so important, especially with your spouse. So put in the time, make it work, and you will be happy you did. So if you like the episode, give us a thumbs up, give us a rating, give us a review, share it with somebody. This is how the podcast grows. This is how we can make more differences and more lives together, and make this world a better place and help people live their vision. By the way, if you haven't been to a Get a Life Getaway yet, that's where it all happens. That's where we teach people to create their own vision, and we kind of get into relationships as well as one of the several things that we discuss as it pertains to your vision. So check out lifenerd.com for that schedule. We will see you soon, everybody. Take care. Thanks for tuning in.